And there we go. How we doing, Chris?
We're doing very well. How are you doing?
Dude, it's a pleasure to have you back as
Pretty
always.
good.
I think it's like the
Thank you,
fourth time
James.
now, even with the
Thank
corrupted
you.
one as well. So maybe five times. So how you been? How you been holding up?
I'm doing well, all things considered. I we had just talked recently about some of the challenges that the world is faced with right now. But all things considered, I'm doing well personally. You guys doing
I'm glad
okay?
to hear.
Yeah, we're doing pretty well. I
Much better.
mean,
Yeah,
we're coming out of lockdown
you
gradually.
are.
Yes,
Yeah,
after
it's
the after the longest lockdown in Europe, I think.
oh my goodness.
Let's
It's
go.
it's interesting. I was reading something the other day, and because there's a big vaccination push here in the U.S. as well as in Europe, and they like to point to the idea that with vaccines, people point to polio, right, and humans quote unquote eradication of polio. And I read this article, and I thought it was really interesting because there's actually an Egyptian uh, I guess you would call it a hieroglyph or a mural that shows an individual that had polio, and that was in 1400 BC. And so polio has been with us throughout the entirety of the history of humankind. And so the question was, the science article was posing, well, what happened in the late 1800s to cause a spike in polio? And it's really interesting because what had happened in the late 1800s, at least in the United States, is we started sanitizing everything. So we started washing our hands. We started, using disinfectants and cleaning things pretty rigorously. And so these scientists were asking the question, well, how is it the human species survived since time immemorial?
That's not a good
Prior to
thing.
Oh,
sanitation,
Yes.
most humans were exposed to the polio virus at infancy through contaminated water supplies and through the antibodies of the child, but also through the breast milk of the mother. Um, Infants developed an immunity to polio, and it's only after we started sanitizing that we started having a problem with polio. So that kind of supports my whole one of my ideas that humans, we really need to think holistically about how we are living life, because the more that we form civilizations, the more that we industrialize our food systems and our transportation, it certainly is causing havoc around the world. So
Yeah.
I thought that
yeah.
article was very interesting because it's as soon as we started, again, sanitation is as soon as we started seeing diseases like polio start to spread pretty abundantly.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's one thing you don't want to be abundant. But yeah, like
That
it
is,
just makes sense if we keep ourselves away from germs. What happens when we get? I guess when we're around them. But if you're
well,
like, I guess like you're exposed to an environment, maybe you're out and about, and you're, I guess you're keeping your immune system strong. Like, um, yeah,
yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think I think it is that 90% of who you are, your physical body, something like 90% is not human DNA, right?
yeah,
So only like 10% of you is actually human DNA. The rest is microbiology. It's bacteria that comprises you. And so one of the issues that you'll find is that the more you bring in sanitation, the more that you bring in disinfectants into your environment, it's going to wreak havoc on you, your physical body, because you yourself, you're a walking organism and you support trillions of microorganisms. And anything that you're going to be using to sanitize your environment is going to have repercussions on you as an animal. You're made of microbiology. And the example that I've given a lot of people is, they'll go around, they'll just spray the shit out of their house with Lysol or some other disinfectant, and then what happens is the bugs and the viruses that remain after you attempt to disinfect are like super organisms. They're super bugs. They're the ones that are very difficult to kill. And so if you then contract one of those, you're in for a world of hurt. A lot of times people will go in and receive treatment for, they'll go to the doctor and, they're receiving antibiotics for whatever is ailing them. But then what's happened is all these, these super germs are starting to emerge. And so, we really need to question whether it's the right thing to do with sanitizing everything. Personally, how I live, I walk barefoot everywhere in my yard. When I go hiking, I'm walking barefoot. I don't wear gloves when I'm, working in the garden. I don't wear gloves when I'm tending to my chickens because I want to interact with that biome. There's trying to think of the gentleman's name. Uh, there's Zach Bush. You know who that is?
Not familiar.
He's yeah, he coined the term, breathe your biome, because what you want to do is you want to understand that you're interacting with all the other microbiology in your environment, and you yourself are made up of trillions of bacteria. You're less human than you are bacteria. So we really need to kind of think about the idea that we're going to attack bacteria, and it's really interesting. I grow mushrooms, and for anyone who has ever grown mushrooms, you will understand how difficult it is to combat a bacteria that is microscopic. It's very, very challenging. So the idea that we're going to sanitize our way out of viruses, I just don't know if that's the right approach. I think that fundamentally your best approach on dealing with COVID, and it's interesting. I've been following the news in India, and there's so many strains and variants that are coming out of India. It's like, I don't know necessarily that the vaccines are going to keep up with the variants. So I've always recommended to people, whether you choose to get a vaccine or not, fundamentally you need to focus on your immune system, because your immune system is going to be what I call the first line of defense.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
for some reason people kind of, I almost find that offensive. Like when we had Brian Sanders on, like he really preaches that. He's this guy, and he like
Yeah.
kind of works in this like paleo kind of diet. Like it's called a
Yeah.
sapien diet. It's a bit more removed.
Sapien, yeah.
You familiar?
Yeah, oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
He's class.
That guy's crazy.
I love him to bits, but dude, I tried it.
The guy's I couldn't.
Can't keep up.
yeah, it's well, so much about it is like, everybody's biology is as unique as your fingerprint, right? So no two people have the same fingerprint. Biology is the same. So when you're thinking about dieting, in my mind, not all diets work for some people. Some people, they swear by the vegan diet, and I can't do veganism, and I don't think it's natural to the human body. But I know some people that have been vegan for years, and their body seems to adapt to it. I just don't fundamentally think that. I know that my body doesn't work well without meat sources, but if yours works well without meat sources, more power to you.
Yeah, we had an Ayurvedic doctor on called Victor Briere, and he's a vegan, and we were talking about that. And the dude's been a vegan for a long time, and he actually looks seriously healthy. But
Pretty
then,
sure he
like,
was ripped, right?
Hmm?
I'm pretty sure he was ripped.
a little bit, yeah. But then when we had Brian Sanders on, who's like the complete opposite, he's like meat, nose to tail, eat the whole thing. Like
Yep.
like you're saying, like it depends on the person. Anything can work for whoever. Like these two guys in the polar opposite, and they look pretty much the same, and they're both doing pretty okay. But
Right.
then you see people can nearly starve to death on both diets.
Yeah, there's some
Like that's pretty bad.
really tragic stories in the US of parents who will feed their children a vegan plant-based
Dude.
diet. And there's been a couple instances where the child has died. But there's a wide spectrum on veganisms, right? You can go and eat absolute shit food and say that you're a vegan, and you're going to have health consequences irrespective of whether you cut out meat or not. I think that you have to put a lot of effort in it. I think, with some vegans, it's unquestionable in my mind that you're going to have some issues with your B vitamins. But if you've been doing it a long time and your body has adjusted to a plant-based diet, and you have a really good diversity, and you're consuming a lot of beans and stuff for protein, um, I think you can do it. I just don't think that the body works optimally. So, and I know that there's a lot of really good knowledge in Ayurvedic medicine, but I think that functionally, I appreciate being strong and being healthy. And like when I eat plant-based diets, I am not strong, and I am not. And the argument that I've used to kind of support, what was the gentleman's name, Sanders, like with the
Brent
sapien
Brent
diet,
Sanders.
or with the paleo diet, is, in my mind, there is not a bioregion on Earth that can support a human without the consumption of meat. So, this kind of, the whole argument that it's natural for us to consume meat, I kind of summarily reject it, because, even in the tropics, you're not going to get density and enough
Sorry,
micronutrients.
you cut out there for a second. Start from the beginning there. Even in the tropics.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that there is not a bioregion on planet Earth where, without the use of industrial agriculture, can you support enough caloric density to support human life. So if you look around you'll see all these cultures, every single one of them consumes meat, whether that's a tribe in the Amazon, whether that's the Kalahari Bushmen, whether it is the Aborigines, they consume meat. And so my argument is, I think three arguments. One is there's a moral argument. One is it's an environmental issue, and the other is a health issue. And so if we want to talk about what is natural, again, I kind of support the paleo sapien type angle, because I don't believe that there's any environment to support enough calories. There's plenty of TV shows where it shows people going out and trying to survive in the wilderness, and they become emaciated very quickly because there's just not enough calories, and you're not going to survive unless you consume animals.
You often notice, even in these like survival shows, if they go out there and they're trying to survive in these areas, they can eat as many wild edibles as they want, but realistically, by like the third or fourth day, if they haven't had some kind of like calorically dense thing like meat, they're pretty fucked.
Yep.
And
yeah, that's exactly right.
It ends pretty fast.
That's exactly right. And I just did a weekend excursion with Bram. He was the guy that was on Dual Survival, and I was having this conversation with him, and I told him, it's like, if you have a plant and that plant is edible, and you pick off a leaf of this plant and you eat it, like that, you bend down, pick it, eat it, digest it, you're at a negative caloric state, right? You've expended more calories to go out and find that leaf. Now, there's an argument that you're getting some micronutrients, but from a calorie perspective, you just simply can't do it. You cannot go into the wilderness and consume only plants. You will perish. I guarantee it. And those shows are perfect examples of that. We have a show here in the U.S. called Alone, and it shows people that just become absolutely emaciated if they don't get meat in their diet. And from a perspective, you would have to eat a truckload of greens to equal a piece of liver from an animal, right? I mean, it's just
seriously. Like Thomas, imagine myself and yourself go out. We're camping in Ireland. Like, well, we load up on wild garlic and blackberries. The shits you would take.
Man, you'd end up calling the Chinese, for fuck's sake.
Dude, you'd be starving to death, but you'd have like a purple mess and no one would want to talk to you. Like, there's not much even in the way here of wild edibles, never mind where you are. I'm not familiar.
Christ.
But dude, you'd want to be getting a bit of fish or something in you. Are you familiar with Les Stroud? Survival Man,
Oh yeah.
Spider Man.
I followed Lester Rod for years. Yeah.
Yeah,
He,
I
he's
point to him as a great example. Everywhere he goes,
yeah
tries to hunt something.
he's a great example. And like I think the one guy that I really have a problem with, to be honest, and I know that people really love the guy, but I have a problem with Bear Grylls because it's like he puts himself in these situations and it's kind of an adventure reality. Stroud, he'll go out there and he will know what it's like to try to survive. And sometimes he's successful in procuring meat, and sometimes he's not, and he goes through hell.
Yeah.
So I fundamentally do not believe that humans can survive, nor were they meant to only consume plants. And if you fall back on ethical or moral or environmental argument, then that's fine. But there's issues with the environmental argument as well as, and in addition to the moral argument, right?
Yeah.
We talked about this last time, right? If you are taking a moral or an ethical argument on veganism or plant-based diet, you fundamentally, you don't know what you're talking about, because yes, it is completely more immoral to eat food from the industrial food society. But I gave you the example last time. It's like, my chickens, they live a better life than some humans do, right? So you can raise animals in an ethical manner, and that, I think, is what's important. It's your culture that is causing you to raise meat in an unethical fashion.
And even with regards to hunting, like you kill one whitetail and it's in your freezer. You have so much of it, you passed off to your friends. Like, it's a community thing, and you're like taking one life and in comparison to, like, you bought 4 different steaks. You got a packet of ham, all these other things in the store.
Yeah, and that's not even factoring in the supply chain cost, right? So there's an environmental cost associated with getting your food to a grocery store, right? We've talked about that. So with regards to hunting, I'm pro hunting. I think we've talked about that as well.
Yeah.
If you, not only that, it's like you are talking about local, right? How much more local can you get than hunting in your own bioregion? But not only that, it's like, it's beyond organic. It's not only is it grass-fed meat. It's like if you go out and you kill a deer, Whole Foods or any other grocery store, they can't compete with that. That's beyond organic. That's wild harvested meat, and that, in my opinion,
I'm almost jealous of you because I've never had the privilege, and like,
oh my goodness,
I've been like a bow hunter for like all these years, but you can't even bow hunt over here.
Yeah, it's like a religious experience. When you take game in the wild and you bring it home and you eat it, it's like a religious experience, because you're fundamentally participating in nature at that point, right? You are the predator, and you will understand how difficult it is. I mean, hunting is not easy. Maybe if you have some huge caliber rifle and some really high-tech optics, that makes things easier. But animals are incredibly smart, and you're fundamentally in their environment when you're hunting. And so hunting can be a humbling experience. But you'll have to let me know the first time maybe you'll have to come to the U.S. to go hunting or something. I'm not sure, but the first time that you actually eat food that you've hunted or that you've trapped, it is a wild, amazing experience, and you will feel different. Like I said, the only way I can describe it is kind of like a religious experience, because it is. I mean, it's like, and all the arguments about sustainability, environmental stewardship, that is at its core the most ethical thing that you can do, in my opinion, is to hunt. And obviously, when you're hunting, there's some ethics that you have to follow. But if I kill a rabbit and I eat that body and then I compost the remains of it, you cannot compare to the whole sustainability argument is kind of out the window and off the table at the same time, because that is fundamentally the ethical and sustainable thing that you can do. Now, that kind of raises a question, because there are 8 billion on this planet, and we are really fucked. And so we can't all go hunting. So
don't sugarcoat it for us.
Understatement, even, Chris. I mean, we're totally fucked.
Yeah.
Did you watch that documentary Seaspiracy? It was on Netflix recently.
Oh, somebody told me to. There's so many good documentaries, and I'm kind of backed up on documentaries, but that's one that people had recommended. Thomas, what's the gist of it?
Oh, he's just kind of exposing how much of the fishing industry causes to the ocean, and like, do you know Trash Island, like the big island
Oh, yeah.
under the sea? That
Yeah,
the reason it kind of like sticks together is a lot of like fishing nets, and he even goes as far as to go as like slave trading on fishing vessels in Japan.
Yeah,
Like,
that was shocking.
The whole
That was serious.
the whole documentary is just fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Was it Japan or was it the coast of Africa?
It was one of the two. No, I think I'm not sure
Yeah.
now. It was either Japan
Paul
or the coast
Watson
of
said.
Africa.
Paul said
Yeah.
about.
But we had the
Yeah.
captain of. Have you heard of Sea Shepherd?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
We
he's well known in the rental world.
Yeah, we had him on our podcast, Paul Watson, and he was
Paul
great
Watson,
to talk to.
right.
He was
And
a
I think
fun character.
It's called Sea Shepherd, right?
Yeah.
Yep. No, there's so I actually posted. I made a post on Instagram about this because there is something called the Pacific Garbage Patch, and not a lot of people talk about this because there is not a lot of good answers. The Pacific Garbage Patch is in the Pacific Ocean. It is larger than the country of India on a surface area, right? It's suspended on the surface all the way down to the sea floor, and it's larger than the country of India, right? You do not have enough industry on planet Earth to remove that much trash. And we keep it because we're such a reckless species that we just continue to dump stuff into the ocean. It always ends up in the ocean. And so there's this thing called the Pacific Garbage Patch, and you can Google it. It's nobody has a good answer for it. The only way that garbage is going to disappear is, a million years of microbiology working on it. But it's enormous. Like I said, larger than the country of India. It's on the surface of the ocean. It's on the floor of the ocean. Suspended everywhere in between. I mean, you can't. Even if you had garbage trucks, on the back of sea freighting vehicles, like, you can't remove that garbage patch. I mean, we've already kind of, shit in our cage, so to speak, right? I mean, there's no way you can remove that much garbage fundamentally. And if you could, where would you put it? It's bigger than the country of India.
That's
so
problem.
There's not a lot of good answers there.
Like, it's the problem we put ourselves in. We're just making an indestructible product, plastic. Like something that can't be destroyed for fucking thousands of years. It's like,
it's not that it's indestructible, man. Like I can fucking break a piece of plastic pretty handy. What can nature?
Yeah, but the problem is that as it breaks down, it becomes what is called microplastic, and the microplastics actually become embedded in the food supply. So when you get a fish, from the ocean, chances are it has microplastics in it.
Are you familiar with that lady who's doing the thing about how it's affecting men? Microplastics.
No, what is it? Is it affecting birth rates or something?
Infertility.
I think I heard something about that.
Infertility, but it's also affecting how masculine men are, or at
How
least
masculine they are. Okay.
in their nether regions. So
I think I've heard that it doesn't subdue testosterone, but it's an anti-testosterone agent. The plastics in it are.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and along with that, if your mom was exposed to microplastics when you were in development and you become a guy, apparently the size of your gooch, like the area between your ass and your balls, that's smaller, and that's like that's actually devastating for men, like as they go through puberty.
Oh my God! Well, maybe that will encourage people to do something. I don't know.
Dude, no, seriously, you tell guys, dude, you could have a hard time down there, like, if you don't sort out this plastic, and I'll tell you why, dude. You have a workforce of half the population of the world. Yeah,
that could very well be. But the problem with pollution in the ocean is the fact that you have 8 billion people on planet Earth, and 7.5 billion of them are consumers. And unless you want to stop buying shit, that trash is just going to continue to accumulate. Even if you tell them, hey, your dick and balls is going to be small. It doesn't, unless you're going to stop consumption, you're still
Yeah.
going to have waste streams, right?
But dude, it's
Yeah.
crazy, especially when it comes to old electronics. That freaks me out so bad. Like I
Oh
got
yeah,
like I had to replace a component in my computer, but I've kept it around just to remind me. I have an old graphics card, yeah,
yeah,
and like I'm looking at it, like it's so complex, and like what had to be done to get that thing to me and to build that thing.
oh
But
for sure.
for computers nowadays, it's useless. What happens to like the thousands of those that were made, or the ones that are even older? That's hard
Yeah,
stuff to get. Like it's
yeah,
not exactly being readily recycled.
right. I mean, this is kind of my whole spiel, right? Is that we live on a finite planet and we have finite resources and we have a population that's growing exponentially, right?
Mm.
So for you to um, have a component to electronics, right? You have to have industry, right? To mine the metals. You have to have oil to create the plastics for the chip itself. All that has to have a supply chain back behind it, and it has to have transportation. If we are faced with a situation where we have scarce resources, you fundamentally have a problem. I mean, permaculture has talked about this for years. Great interview by Dave Holmgren, who's the co-founder of permaculture, and he actually talks about this. He's like, he believes that in his lifetime we will see such a marked transition in society that um, electronics will be a rarity. I mean, not everyone is going to have them because we're running out of resources, and it's not just the fact that we're running out of resources, but the cost to extract the resources continues to climb, right? And this is the whole thing with the argument behind peak oil, right? Is that there is still oil left on planet Earth, but the cost to extract it is just going up and up and up, kind of driving some of the issues with pricing in oil. So the reason that the Russians are venturing into the Arctic to find oil is because all the low-hanging fruit of oil around the world is gone.
Yeah.
In the US, we have, shale oil. Well, that requires you to melt rock, basically. So um, we continue to kind of put on this as far as our energy is concerned. And fundamentally, you're going to hit an inflection point where the cost to extract exceeds its commodity value. And then you've got a hell of a problem on your hands because end products can only go up in price.
Yeah. We're gone. No, I am familiar with places that do recycle electronic components, but I'm not sure of any in Ireland that would be as
It,
specific
it,
as computer
it,
components.
the problem with recycling is that it takes energy in to recycle something, right? So
But
let's say
it's
that you
far
take,
less than like rebuilding that.
right, exactly. Well, the thing is like, let's say that you take a computer and you recycle your computer. Well, they're going to take all the metal components out of it and they're going to melt it. Well, to melt those components, you're going to be using fossil fuels to melt it. So there's an energy input that goes into the recycling process, and there's a measure of throughput, right? So if you put 100 units into a recycling facility, you may only get, you know, 10 units out the back end because there's inefficient throughput. And part and parcel of that is the energy consumption that it takes to um, to recycle it itself, to melt it down, to repurpose it. I made a post about renewable energy, and this is one of the biggest lies with regards to renewable energy is because even if you could uh, repurpose or recycle solar panels, you still have to have an energy component that goes into the recycling process. You can't just take a solar panel and put it in a
Yeah.
factory. That factory has to run on energy.
Mhm.
Hmm.
It's funny. It's funny you bring up renewable energies because we had a guy on fairly recently, Samuel Goodman, who wrote the book Beyond Carbon Neutral.
Yep.
Brilliant book. Recommend it to anyone who's listening right now. Samuel's a great guy. Some great ideas, and within his book, he brings up like how we could be carbon neutral now and how we can go even beyond carbon neutral with our current technologies. So he looks at it like with every way he can. So he's looking at like, you know, you know, like solar panels, touches on nuclear, like it's not really an option, but if it's available at the moment, use it rather than coal, whatever. Hydroelectricity, wind power, and geothermal, blah blah blah. Like he went on with it, and like he's kind of onto something. But the big problem he talks about in his book is it's people who think, like that renewable energies are ugly to look at.
Mhm.
Is like a it's a gigantic problem. Even where we are right now in Ireland, is the big push away from wind turbines here because of them being unsightly. Um, it's pretty bad over here. Um,
Yeah, I mean, the issue, so, it's interesting because I would love to have a conversation with that individual because I spent most of my professional career actually working in renewables, and there's a lot of, dirty secrets about renewables. But the one example that I offer people is, if you have solar panels, to extract the silicon or, the cadmium or the telluride that goes into a solar panel, you have to blow the top off of a mountain. And if we're going to put solar panels everywhere around the world, you're going to have to blow the tops off of every single mountain on planet Earth, right? I mean, it's the environmental cost of a solar panel. Nobody talks about it because humans have this issue with cognitive dissonance. Like we can't hold on to the idea that we have a serious problem on our hands. And so we tell ourselves stories about how everything is going to be fine. And people point to, oh, well, look, we're transitioning to renewable energy. The fact of the matter is like if you have a solar panel, you've got to mine the components that go into a solar panel. If you have a wind turbine, that thing takes barrels of oil. It's an engine that's, 20 times the size of a car engine, maybe even larger. It takes a lot of oil to keep that running. So on a monthly basis, you're adding oil to a wind turbine. And, there's a species of bat that's called the hoary bat. They actually think this bat might go extinct from wind turbines. So the position that I take on this is that largely, whether it's biomass or renewables or hydro or nuclear, that all falls within the umbrella of a tech fix. And I have major issues with the tech fix because I fundamentally fall back on the idea that if humans are going to live sustainably on planet Earth, it's going to probably look like some kind of indigenous culture. It's going to look like, the Kalahari Bushmen in Africa. It's not going to look like, flying cars
a huge problem with that is the size of the population can't sustain that at all.
yeah, they've actually done studies on this. And, realistically speaking, I'm being completely honest, and there's a lot of misinformation about this, but they've actually done studies on this. And I actually fundamentally kind of adhere to the idea planet Earth can probably support 500 million to a billion people, somewhere in that range. We are so far beyond living within our means and living within what is called carrying capacity of planet Earth, right? So all three of us do not live sustainably, right? We are a net cost to the natural world. And so there's a continuum there. Some people can live more sustainably than others, but unless you are, unless you're one of those tribes in the Amazon or Africa or Australia, you're fundamentally you're at a net cost and to the environment, and you cannot do that with 8 billion people, right? So it's a real issue because fundamentally in biology, whenever a species exceeds its carrying capacity, there would be necessarily a correction to the population because that's just how nature works. It's a balancing mechanism. And so, a lot of environmentalists have talked about this. They say, well, we can exceed carrying capacity, but only temporarily. And so it's not a question of when we're going to be facing collapse. It's just, well, actually, it's not a question if, but when we're going to be facing collapse.
Yeah.
there's just so many things out there that are, red alarms everywhere that, and the reason not much is getting done is because nobody really has any good answers as to what to do.
Yeah, you're right. And I wish we weren't. I wish we weren't having this conversation. Wish we were
Man,
talking about sunshine and rainbows and
Chris,
it's
whenever
gonna
I
be
talk
okay.
to you, I just feel this constant fear because I know it's like what you're saying is true,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and it would take such a global effort to fix the problems, do you know? And it's
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, look at it. It's, we had a global response to COVID.
mm,
COVID, an upper respiratory infection, a pretty severe one, but I think COVID has a 98.6% survival rating. And our response to that was everyone go in their house and don't come out. So what happens when we have a real issue on our hands? We're just fundamentally, we're not prepared for it. I posted about this recently. It's a really interesting story. It's a really tragic story, actually. But in the People's Republic of China, I don't know if you guys saw this post, but during Mao Zedong, they implemented something called the Four Pest campaign. And so they tried to eradicate mosquitoes, rats, flies, and sparrows. And they nearly caused sparrows to be extinct. But what happened is that with no sparrows, locust population exploded and they decimated crops. And what you had was the Great Chinese Famine that killed, they think on the low end 15 million people, and on the high
I
end
seen this post.
55 million people. Yeah, so check out that post. It's a history lesson that nobody really likes to talk about, but that was only 60 years ago. 50 million people died 60 years ago because we were thinking that we knew better for the environment,
Yeah.
and millions of people died as a result.
It's an awful, awful thing, and it is something that's gotten pretty serious in Europe as well. Like the locust swarms. I know
Yep.
that they can devastate Spain, like the Mediterranean region as a whole. Like wait till they keep going up further north. What happens when they get to France? What happens when they get to
Yeah.
the UK? What happens when they get to Ireland?
Yeah. Well, and not only that, like there's, one of the biggest issues, I don't know I don't know if you guys have this in Ireland, but, what people are, vineyards where they grow grapes to make wine,
No, it's not here.
those vineyards are continuing to move farther and farther north. And what is interesting about that is that so, put locust swarms to the side right now, right? We have the biggest issue right now is that we are faced with abrupt climate change. So, going back to the carbon dioxide argument, in 40 years, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased by over 40%. There is nothing in the geological record that points to any type of aberration like this. If you were to look at the geological record, the last time we had above 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you have to go back 25 million years. But never in the history of the geologic record have you seen, parts per million of carbon dioxide go from 300 to over 400 in 40 years. That is an instantaneous explosion of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And so, put carbon dioxide to the side for one moment. The real issue that we have is we have an unstable climate on planet Earth, and that is the scariest thing that nobody is talking about, because we cannot deal with abrupt climate change. So when the climate changes, I can't remember who you were telling me that you had interviewed recently, but the problem that we're faced with right now is the cat's kind of out of the bag now, right? We're already into that point where the climate is unstable. And so a lot of people believe that there's nothing that we can do now to kind of get the climate back in control, right? So, the Kyoto Accord, nothing like that. We fundamentally, we cannot reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to the point where it would be quote unquote stable. And nature takes millions of years to stabilize an atmosphere or a climate. And so the argument is that we basically don't have anything we can't control an unstable climate at this point. Even if we were to stop emissions, um, the climate is already faced with instability, and so that to me is pretty damn scary, because if you don't have a stable climate, you don't have an ecosystem that supports life very well.
Yeah, and it's scary stuff, especially with rising sea levels.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the thing is, there's certain things that humans can adapt to. We can adapt to rising sea levels, and it's interesting. I'm here in Southern California, and if you buy a house on the beach, you can't get insurance, and you can't get a mortgage to buy the house because a bank doesn't want to finance you, and an insurance provider isn't going to offer you insurance. So all these multi-million-dollar homes you see off the coast of Southern California, those have been paid for with cash, because no bank will lend against it. No insurance company will offer you an insurance policy on it because of rising sea levels. But what worries me mostly is the impact on crops, right? I mean, if we have something that happens with the climate where we have an inability to grow produce, we've got a massive problem on our hands, and we've got 8 billion people to deal with, and if we have a disruption in the agricultural production, oh my goodness gracious, there's just no way to save it. I mean, people will die if we're faced with abrupt climate change. There's just no way around it.
Do you ever think you'd go into a career in politics, man? I think you do a pretty good job running the fucking world right now, man. They need someone like you to make these tough decisions, because they're kind of just like lay back.
But the problem is they're expensive, and when people see their taxes going towards something that doesn't affect them directly,
yeah,
they don't give a, they get angry. They don't give a fuck.
True.
Yeah, like, I mean, I don't know how it is in Europe, but I'm not in the U.S. The political system is just fucking useless.
Don't start
Like,
saying. Don't start.
I'm not sure if good people enter politics and politics makes them bad, or if bad people enter politics. But to be honest, guys, I kind of adhere to anarchy at this point, because the political decisions are not going to get us there, right? I mean,
dude, I used to think that was such a stupid idea, and then anarchy. I used to think it was such a dumb idea. A friend told me about it when I was 14. I was like, "You're a fucking idiot." And as I get older, I'm like, "Ooh."
Bad idea, man.
Yeah, there's a quote, and I can't really remember it, but something that I think it was a Edward Abbey quote. He just said that there's so few people that can govern themselves. There must be fewer people that can govern other people.
Yeah.
And so, and in indigenous cultures, we don't see these massive governments, with multiple levels of hierarchy, and there's just a shuttle.
We're not supposed to live like this. I think that's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, it's definitely not supposed to look like this. I personally have given up hope on all politics. I used to follow politics very closely, and then I just realized every fucking thing is a lie in politics, and you cannot look to politicians to help you. At least that's how it is in the U.S. I don't know how it is in Europe.
Oh, it was really funny today. Our Taoiseach, which is like our president, got vaccinated today, and he wrote a post saying, "I just want to thank all the nurses, student nurses, for their hard and continued work." And then someone posted a picture. It was like, "This you," and it was his party voting against to pay student nurses. And it was just so.
They were such scumbags for that.
Like, they wouldn't give them €100 a week.
It was borderline slave labor. They could miss out on their course if they didn't. Like, they would lose their course if they didn't work as nurses, and they're working full time while studying, and they weren't getting paid for it.
Yeah.
So it's like, do it or else. And it went on not for maybe a couple of weeks. It went on for
it's
months.
Still going on, I think.
Well, they would have just finished for a year now, but it's been going. They wouldn't even fucking pay them.
Yeah. I mean, if a politician's mouth is moving, it's probably a lie. And politicians will say anything to get elected. They'll say anything to stay in office. It is the worst of the human condition in my mind. Like I have to utterly reject all politics. And, this is, there's the argument, oh, well, you should vote. I mean, like in my lifetime, I've seen nothing but a downward spiral in politics. I have no faith whatsoever that the government can actually do anything that would materially improve the human condition.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of, I'm betting on the people to make a decision, because if you're waiting for the government to help you out, or to make some good, prudent decisions, or actually, to be an example of a human being, like I've never come across a politician in my lifetime where I say that is exemplary of a human being and how we should all be. That is a leader. I've never once said that with a politician. They're always disappointing. They're always lying. I can't deal with it. Yeah.
Like even if you want to go into like ones that you think you liked, like Obama had a lovely little smile on him. I'm sure he was very friendly, but then like what was going on when like in wars when he was around, some
Yeah.
seriously fucked stuff.
Mm.
Even when
well,
Trump
and the
was
thing is,
around, same as Biden,
Yeah.
With love and support from the US, he's drone striking Syria,
right. That's
Like,
exactly right.
come
And
on.
the thing is like, irrespective, in the US, whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, it just seems very odd to me that, in the US, like all major presidential elections are so evenly divided, 50-50, right? And so you got to fundamentally say, if I think that guy is full of shit, it's very possible that, your guy is full of shit as well. And they just play off of this competitive nature of humans, right? And so it's like my team versus your team, and we're watching a fucking football game at this point, right? That's just ridiculous. Party systems just don't make any sense to me whatsoever. You should be voting based on the proposition in front of
As
you,
well as that,
and you should
binary
support your
party
team.
systems are terrible.
Yeah, binary
Like
party systems.
we had similar up until like last year.
Yep.
We had a binary system constantly until one other party broke through. But they were so under-prepared. They did not think they were going to win, so they couldn't even like govern properly. They're doing like a half and half kind of thing.
Right.
Like in the States, if the Democrats are going to do one thing, a couple of years later, the Republicans are going to come around, try undo it, or vice versa.
Right, exactly. So, don't get me started on Trump, but as soon as Trump left office, Biden overturned a bunch of things that Trump had did. And if Biden leaves office, his predecessor will likely undo a lot of things. And we just fucking go in circles, back and forth. And like I said, I've never really have been, I've never seen a politician, and there's some that, I like, there's things that they say, and I'm like, that makes a lot of sense to me. But as far as implementing something, there's just no chance in hell. I think, Joe Rogan had talked about this one time, which is, if you have all the great ideas and all the great ideals, and you get into politics, it's a machine of backstabbing and throat cutting. And even if you have the best ideas and the best policies, you can't implement them because it's like it's a damn soap opera.
Yeah, and it's complete BS as well. Because
Yep.
who was that lady? I think she's the only woman to run for presidency last year. What was her name again?
Where? In what country?
In the United States.
Oh, the independent who got all the votes.
Yeah, what was her name again?
Oh, I can't remember her name.
She got labeled a Russian asset when she'd served overseas twice. Like in the military. Like, explain that.
Like, what did she say?
What, like, when she went for presidency, she did okay, in fairness to her. But the thing that was spread about her, that the lie that was spread about her, was that she was a Russian asset, and people would just kind of like throw her the bus. She's a Russian asset. You wouldn't touch her with a fucking 10-foot pole.
Oh my god.
But she served overseas twice, and like all of her stuff was like about as centrist as you could possibly go.
Yep.
Yeah, like I know that they will just say anything about the opponents.
Of course, that's exactly right. That's because it's like this. There's a campaign strategy to discredit your opponent.
Yes.
And you can make up lies, because that's what every single one of them does, is they make up lies about their opponent to try to discredit them, and that ruins their reputation. And it's just an absolute cesspool. It really is. So I just, from my perspective, I can't believe a single thing that a politician tells me. and I have no hope that there's going to be a political strategy or a political outcome that will improve our situation on planet Earth.
I remember reading that thing, Jared. It was like, so there's three really big Irish parties. There's Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and Sinn Féin. And this article came out, and it was like Fine Gael have more tweets that involve the word Sinn Féin than Sinn Féin have on their own Twitter. Because they all they do is bash them. It's all because a couple of years ago they were involved with the troubles in Ireland with the IRA. Well, like the leader of Sinn Féin was.
Well, they were supposedly involved.
They were supposedly involved in,
like even that guy they call or that guy that they say was in the IRA, Jerry Adams, has denied it and denied it and denied it. Even now, still denies it. But you know, there's stuff to be said there.
Yeah, and then remember like about a month ago, Jared, they made Mary Lou apologize for that bombing that happened when she was 11.
Jesus. Yeah, like
they made her apologize because she represented the party, or I don't fucking know, to be honest with you. They were like, do you accept responsibility?
It's because Sinn Féin got in, so now it's like the other two parties are working together just to slander it, basically. So.
Well,
yeah, but like, it's just like you said,
it's the same thing as in the U.S. Like, I suspect that's how the entire world operates. You know, governments around the world. You know, I like to bash governments because
Saudi Arabia might be different.
What's that?
Saudi Arabia might be different. They don't give a fuck what anyone else thinks. It's just like one guy in charge.
Yeah, exactly. Have you guys been following what's going on in the Middle East right now?
Yeah,
it's a fucking war zone.
That's
terrible.
Crazy.
It's
literally wars. Like the UN thinks it's gonna be war.
Oh really? I wouldn't be surprised. You know, it's like not only that. Like I don't know. At least this is in the U.S. There's tremendous amount of inflationary pressure right now in the U.S. We've got lumber prices that are up by like 30%. You know, there's so many. You know,
just grow a tree.
Just grow a tree, right? Exactly. But there's so many issues, you know, like ever since the 2008 recession in the United States, the government has been pumping in trillions of dollars in liquidity into the system. And now it's coming back to catch up to them. And not only that, we had so many issues with COVID where the supply chains of the world were disrupted. So, you know, I'm really concerned about what the next couple of years are going to look like. You know, put climate change and, you know, the environment to the side. We've got some macroeconomic issues that the world is going to be faced with. I'm certain of it.
Oh, I completely agree with you there. We have this huge problem in Ireland actually with inflation. Do you know what a Freddo is?
Don't start. Don't tell the story.
Freddo. So Freddo is this little chocolate frog, and there was a recession back in 2008 for us as well, actually. And wouldn't you believe it? The price of a Freddo has gone up by 25 cents in the last 15 years, from 15 cents to 40 cents.
For context,
it's ridiculous.
No,
Jared, I'm speaking. My turn. Shut up.
He doesn't know what a Freddo is.
I'm pissed about it.
What is it? It's a piece of candy?
It was a chocolate bar.
It is the god of candy, my friend. It is levels beyond what you understand candy to be.
Okay, listen. It's a small chocolate bar that used to be 5 cents. Then it got to 10 cent, 15, 20. Now, when we were kids, it was 20.
Yeah.
And then it got to 25. It was like, whoa. You know, you used to be able to get 5, now you're getting 4. That's dodgy. Then they went the extra mile and they said, you know what, it's 30. It's time for 30. And whoa. Now you have 10 cents left over, you got 3. That's disgusting. 35. Unshare that screen.
They expect me to pay 40 cents for this shit. Are you kidding me? This thing is not even worth a cent. I don't understand it. But they're killing us. They're killing us.
Oh wow.
Horrible.
If only you knew what that did to the recording.
I don't care.
Because like I have it cropped on all of our heads, so it just went like.
I don't know. Like, well, have you guys? You know, one of the things that we talk about in the U.S. is the price of a college education. Or, you know, like when I was in high school, I filled up my gas for 89 cents a gallon. I filled up yesterday for $4.25 US. You know, that's like 20 years, right? So that's crazy. The cost of a college education, the cost of a median home price nothing is keeping pace with median income. So there just is this widening gap where things become more expensive. People aren't getting paid more, and people are getting squeezed.
Yeah, it's seriously unfortunate, but it's kind of the product of our times and our forefathers and the dodgy stuff they were up to. I don't know, like realistically, like three of us can't do much except talk about it.
Yeah,
I like that you're very self-sufficient. I really admire that about you,
yep.
and like happy to learn more about that from you anytime. But like, it would take a global effort to get us out of this.
Yeah,
But it
I don't
starts
know
with
where.
things like what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, if every single person on planet Earth, started practicing permaculture, we still wouldn't make it. We're, like I said, we're um, we're just going to have to be dealing with the repercussions of the decisions that we have already made. So this is going to get ugly, and it's not going to be pretty, no matter what we do at this point. It's not going to be pretty. So we kind of the global conversation that we need to have is not how do we avert disaster, but how do we manage through impending doom, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a nice note to finish off on, Chris.
No, we're gonna finish on a positive note. Give us a positive note, Chris. You've been going on Instagram. Your reach is getting out there. Every episode we do with you keeps getting bigger and bigger. What else is going on?
Well, maybe one positive thing I'll leave you with, which is it's very interesting because the intensity of the sun has actually increased 30% since the planet has been formed. But there has been feedback mechanisms on Earth that has caused that to be ameliorated somewhat. So we have this. I think people have to think of Earth as a living organism that has feedback mechanisms, right? So I really think that we're lucky to have gotten to 8 billion at this point because we've done so much environmental destruction. But there are feedback mechanisms that we should see in the future. But I do have to tell you about this one thing, and I'm sorry because it's not a positive thing. So I'm gonna now that I think of it. So are you guys ready for this one?
Go on, hit us with it.
Okay. After this call, I want you to Google something called global dimming. Okay, it's DIMMING, and nobody talks about it. Okay, so this is I think this is how we should leave this conversation. Since our industrial revolution, since the world has industrialized, we have pumped up a whole bunch of particulate matter into the atmosphere, sulfur and other things that are in the atmosphere. But what happens is the sun, as it shines down on planet Earth, all these photons hit this particulate matter in the atmosphere and they bounce off. So what happened is the amount of pollution that we put up into the atmosphere has actually been saving our lives. And what happened with COVID is, everyone talked about, oh, the skies are getting clearer because we have because there's the world economies have been shut down. But honestly, that's the last thing that we want to happen at this point, because the particulate matter, our pollution in our atmosphere, is actually reducing global warming. So if we were to reduce emissions, if we were to reduce the amount of particulate matter in the atmosphere, we could likely burn up at this point, because we have pumped up so much pollution in the atmosphere. It's basically shading the planet. And in history, there's examples of this, like when volcanoes erupt, they emit all this stuff into the atmosphere, and scientists can measure how that has actually cooled Earth.
Yeah.
Same thing is happening.
That was like a big factor in the Permian extinction. It just blocked out the sun.
It blocked out the sun. They've even done this in recent times, but we have polluted the atmosphere so much that it's actually shading the Earth, and it's reducing the amount of irradiance from the sun that's hitting planet Earth. if we do anything now that reduces the amount of pollution that goes up into the atmosphere, it would likely have the impact of warming the planet at an exponential rate. So again, I say this because, you know, the genie is out of the bottle, the cat is out of the bag. We cannot go backwards. We have to have a discussion about how we're going to manage this going forward. But that's one of the really scary things. So talk about global dimming. You know, there are what they call climate engineers who have actually talked about the idea that as climate change becomes worse and worse, our only hope might be to blacken the skies, to pump particulate matter up
You're
into the
starting to
atmosphere.
sound like the story of Snowpiercer.
Okay, that's exactly right. There are companies right now that have proposed to the government, and they're seeking grant funding to pump up particulate matters into the atmosphere to shade the planet Earth. So that movie Snowpiercer, that's based on real discussions among climate engineers.
Fuck.
Man.
I said something positive.
Yeah, Jared, this is your fault. Now we're talking about this shit, man. I didn't have to go to bed thinking. I was going to bed thinking, all right, we could probably sort this shit out. But now it's like, no, we're gonna black out
control.
I was like, oh, you like the sun, huh? Check this out.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's like, yeah. I mean, the problem is, you know, in the U.S. we had our first Earth Day, you know, 51 years ago. Okay, so at least 51 years ago, we were having this same conversation that said, man, if we don't do something, shit's going to get bad. And you know what? We didn't do anything, and shit's getting bad. And the problem is, guys, is that this is out of our ability to control it. Because unless you want to go back to wearing animal skins and living in debris huts, there is not a good solution out there. So,
I mean, the basic thing, like anyone like myself and yourself could do, is take care of your local area, because at this point, it's all you can do.
Yeah,
like,
do not worry. Yeah, that's exactly right. So what I'll leave you with is this. Do not worry about how this is going to play out. Do not worry about how this is going to end. What you need to concern yourself with is how you conduct yourself. You know, help the people that need help, and be a leader. You know, it's like, whatever the government is doing, do the opposite of that, right? Help people in your local community. There are people that are disadvantaged in comparison to what your position is. Go out and help them. It doesn't matter if we're going to all die. How you conduct yourself in life is paramount, because we're all going to eventually die, right? So it depends on how you carry yourself in the world. Be a leader. Be a good human being. Help other people. And, you know, no matter how this plays out, you will always say that you put your best foot forward.
There you go. So if people want to check you out, Chris, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Upgrade Downloading.
Yeah. And if you want to check him out, he has some quality stuff. He keeps getting bigger and bigger and better and better. He's talking about some important shit like you heard today. And there's no doubt in our mind we're going to have him on again. Isn't that right, Thomas?
Absolutely. Oh, I can't wait, Chris. I always love Jared goes, we're having Chris on today. I'm like, fuck yes, we're having Chris on today.
All right, so thanks for watching. Take it handy. Bye-bye. Fucking conduct yourself well. Good luck.